I was 68 years old the day I watched my life get reduced to a stack of paper. The conference room on the 12th floor of the courthouse smelled like lemon cleaner and stale coffee. One whole wall was glass, looking out over the river and the low gray clouds pressing down on the city. The other three were bare, sound-deadening panels, the kind that swallowed voices. It felt less like a room and more like a padded cell for people with too much money and not enough sense. On my side of the table sat my attorney, Elena Ruiz. I'd known Elena for almost 20 years, long enough to remember when the streaks in her hair were from the sun and not stress. She was small, compact, with sharp dark eyes behind thin frames, and every line of her body was drawn tight. Her legal pad was covered in notes and underlines, arrows stabbing at phrases she hated. Across from us, Sabrina lounged in her chair like she was on a talk show couch. 42 years old, not a hair out of place. White blazer, beige blouse, gold necklace that glinted every time she tossed her head back to laugh at something only she heard. Her skin had that smooth, poreless look that costs more than some people's cars. Beside her, her lawyer, a man named Kellen Price, tanned in February and smug in any weather, shuffled the top document in his file. He smiled at me, all teeth and no warmth. "All right," he said, his voice smooth as hotel lobby music. "Let's walk through the settlement so there's no confusion." As if there hadn't been 3 months of emails and drafts and late-at-night phone calls to get us here. Per our latest revision, he went on, Mr. Hale will transfer to Ms. Hale full ownership of the marital home on Lake Meriden, including the main residence, boathouse, and dock. He will also transfer the secondary property, known as the North Shore Cabin, both Mercedes vehicles and all household contents, fixtures, furnishings, artwork, and appliances. He didn't look up as he read. To him, it was just a list. To me, it was weekends swinging a hammer until my shoulders screamed, deals negotiated over cheap coffee, lady-night site visits in the rain, wondering if I'd make payroll. And, he added, Mr. Hale will make a lump sum equalization payment in the amount of, here we are, $1.3 million, within 30 days of the court's entry of judgment. He finally raised his head, checking my face for a reaction. I watched Sabrina instead. She was studying her nails, bored, as if this were all a foregone conclusion. And, Kellen said with a little flourish now, Ms. Hale retains the right to continue using the Hale surname and all branding, naming and goodwill associated with the Hale residence, and related social media channels and ventures. At that, Sabrina looked up, eyes bright. Exactly, she said. My followers know me as Sabrina Hale. Rebranding now would be disruptive. She said followers the way people my age used to say parishioners. Alina's pen snapped in half between her fingers. Ink blood onto her notes. This is obscene, she muttered, low enough that only I could hear. Martin, we can shred this. The prenup alone. Kellen cleared his throat delicately. Additionally, he said, given the disparity in future earning capacity and Ms. Hale's need to maintain a consistent lifestyle during this transition, Mr. Hale will provide 12 months of transitional support at the agreed-upon figure and will assume responsibility for Ms. Hale's reasonable legal fees. Alina couldn't hold back. Reasonable, she shot back. You've billed more hours than construction crews put into that damn house. He ignored her, the way men like him have always ignored angry women they can't bill. I sat there and listened to him list my life. The house on Lake Meriden with its cedar beams and wraparound deck. The cabin I'd bought as a bare patch of dirt and turned into a retreat with my own 2 hands. The cars I barely drove. The furniture Sabrina had insisted we upgrade every other year because styles changed and God forbid the couch looked dated in the background of her videos. 14 years of marriage. 40 years of work before that. One slim stack of paper. Elena leaned toward me, her voice a hiss. We can win this, Martin, she said. We have her texts, the photos, the hotel statements, the prenup, the separate property. You don't have to give her the houses, the cars, the brand. We go in front of a judge, we cut this in half, maybe less. Don't sit here and let her gut you. I kept my eyes on Sabrina. She was scrolling her phone now, thumb flicking lazily. From this angle I could see the case I'd bought her for her last birthday, leather embossed with her initials. SH. She'd told me she loved it more than jewelry because it was practical and classy, like you, babe. It had been 2 days before I found the first message from a man named Trevor saved under pilates. "I'm not going to fight," I said. Elena turned on me. "The hell you aren't," she said. "This is a massacre." "I'm not going to fight," I repeated quieter. "I'm going to end it. Today. Here, just make sure the clause about Evan stays exactly as we drafted it." Kellen picked up on the name. "Yes," he said smoothly. "The minor child. There is, of course, the issue of Evan." He pulled out a single page from the middle of the stack and slid it forward, like a magician producing a card. "At Mr. Hale's insistence," he said, "we've included a clause clarifying parental responsibilities and future claims. In summary, Ms. Hale acknowledges that primary physical and legal custody of Evan Hale will be with Mr. Hale. She further waives any claim to current or future financial arrangements made for or on behalf of Evan, including but not limited to trusts, inheritances, educational funds, or other assets held in his name." He glanced at me. "This protects your son from being used as leverage in any future proceeding. It also allows Ms. Hale to move forward unencumbered. A clean break. A clean break," Sabrina echoed, like she was trying the words on for size. Elena's hand closed around my wrist under the table. "Martin," she whispered, "we can get this without giving her everything. She doesn't want custody. She barely wants visitation. She'll sign away her rights for a song." "I know," I said. "And she will." I picked up the pen. The room seemed to shrink. The murmur of voices from the hallway faded. All I could hear was the faint buzz of the fluorescent lights and my own heartbeat, slow but steady. I signed my name on the first page. Martin J. Hale. The letters didn't look like mine anymore. They looked like something a stranger had taught his hand to do while he wasn't paying attention. I signed again and again and again. Next to property descriptions, VN numbers, account balances. I barely saw the words. I'd read them so many times they were burned into the backs of my eyelids. When I reached the clause with Evan's name, I paused. Evan James Hale. 17 years old. Taller than me now, though he still slouched like a boy who'd grown faster than his confidence. Quiet, serious, with a mind that worked sideways and a heart that bruised easy. Sabrina had stopped pretending she didn't hear. "If he wants to live like a monk in a rental with you," she said, "let him. I'll take the rest." She laughed, like it was a joke, like our son was a piece of luggage she'd decided not to check. I looked up. "You're sure?" I asked her. "You understand what you're signing?" She rolled her eyes. "He's more like you anyway," she said. "Let the two of you sit around and talk about whatever it is you talk about. He drags my energy down. I need a fresh start." The court reporter, who had been tapping away without expression, glanced up just for a second, her mouth tight. "Martin," Elena said again, "last warning. Don't do this." I signed. The pen didn't shake. Kellen gathered the papers, face flushed with victory. "Excellent," he said. "I'll have the clerk process these, and then we can pop in front of the judge for confirmation. We'll be out of here in time for lunch." He stood, already halfway to the door, then stopped, frowning slightly. "Oh," he said, flipping back through the pages. "There's some boilerplate in here about underlying land interests held by third-party entities." His brow furrowed. "Did your guy draft that in?" he asked Elena. "It's standard," she said. "You approved that language in the last round." He shrugged. Sure, he said. "Just making sure there are no surprises." He leaned down toward Sabrina, voice dropping, but the room was so still I caught fragments. You didn't ask about the land." Sabrina's smirk faltered for the first time that morning. She brushed it off with a little flick of her hand. "If it wasn't important," she said, "it wouldn't be in 12-point font. Go file it, Kellen. I have a house to redecorate." He left with the documents. The door side closed behind him. 10 minutes later we were standing in a courtroom that looked like it hadn't changed since my father's time. Dark wood, high ceiling, flags drooping in the still air. The judge, a woman maybe my age, maybe younger, it's hard to tell from the bench, shuffled the agreement with a practiced eye. "Mr. Hale," she said, looking over her glasses at me, "do you understand that this settlement transfers your interest in the Lake Meriden residence, the North Shore cabin, both vehicles, and associated contents to your wife?" "Yes, Your Honor," I said. You understand that you are agreeing to provide support as outlined and to assume Ms. Hale's legal fees. Yes, Your Honor. And you understand that Ms. Hale shall have no further legal or financial obligations regarding your minor son, Evan Hale, as per this clause. I do. Her gaze sharpened. Are you entering into this agreement freely and voluntarily? Are you under any duress, coercion, or impairment of judgment? Behind me, I could feel Elena's stare burning between my shoulder blades. I thought about lying, just for a second. Saying no, I didn't understand. That I'd been confused, that I'd changed my mind. But the thing about foundations is, once you pour them, you have to live with what you built on top. No, Your Honor, I said. I'm not under duress. I've been planning this for years. Her eyebrows rose a hair, but she made no comment. She signed. The clerk stamped. The sound bounced off the paneled walls, one more nail in a coffin everyone but me thought was mine. Divorce is granted, she said. You're free to go. Free. Funny word, in a room where everything had just been weighed and measured and priced. In the hallway outside, Sabrina's laughter echoed off the marble. She snatched the keys from Elena when my lawyer handed them over without looking at me, like they were contaminated. The key fob to the Mercedes, the brass key to the cabin, the black plastic rectangle that armed and disarmed the lake house alarm. She held them all in her palm, then let them fall through her fingers in a bright little cascade, metal on metal. Listen to that, she said to no one in particular. The sound of freedom. Kellen checked his watch. If we hurry, we can get to the club before the lunch crowd, he said. We should toast your new life, Miss Hale. She linked her arm through his. It's Mrs. Hale, she corrected, legally, still, always. They started toward the elevators. Just before the doors slid open, Kellen leaned in close again, voice low. Seriously, though, I heard him murmur, we might want to look into that land language. Just to be safe, she shrugged. If there are any problems, she said, we'll throw some money at it. That's what money is for. The doors closed on her smile. Elena rounded on me. You just let her walk away with almost everything you've ever built, she said. I hope you understand that. The house, the cabin, your name, your reputation. You'll be lucky if there's enough left to rent a 2-bedroom somewhere decent. We can appeal. We can challenge the voluntariness. Say the stress. No, I said. It's done. She stared at me, anger giving way for the first time all morning to something like disbelief. Have you gone soft, Martin? She asked quietly. Is this about penance? Some lady life crisis? I thought of Evan, sitting in the gallery, not looking at us when we filed out. Of his hunched shoulders, the way he'd stopped bringing friends over, because he never knew which version of his mother he'd get. Of the half-finished sketch of the lake house I'd seen on his desk, the eraser worn down to a nub at the shoreline. She wanted the house, the cars, the brand, I said. Let her have them. All she ever really cared about were the walls people could see. And you? Elena asked. What do you care about? The foundation, I said, and the boy standing on it. She frowned. Martin, just tell me one thing, I said. The clause about Evan. It's airtight. As airtight as the law allows, she said slowly. She has no parental rights, no claim on any trust, any inheritance, anything you put in his name now or later. She chose that. We have her signature. Good, I said. People brushed past us in the corridor, other ruined families with their own folders, their own losses. No one looked twice at the old man who'd just given away almost everything he owned. They saw a fool maybe, a sentimental idiot, a tired husband too beaten down to fight. They had no idea what Sabrina had really taken when she walked out of that room clutching my keys. When I first wrote that clause 20 years earlier, I prayed I'd never need it. I'd hoped I was just a paranoid ex-contractor who couldn't stop thinking about worst-case scenarios. But standing there, watching her sign without a blink, I knew today was the day the trap door finally opened. I didn't start out in glass conference rooms and courtrooms. I started in mud. If you want to understand why I did what I did with Sabrina, you have to picture me at 32 years old, standing in a half-frozen pit with a shovel in my hands and concrete splattered up my legs. Back then it was just me and 3 guys in second-hand work boots, running a little outfit called Hale Foundations. We poured basements for split levels and slabs for cheap strip malls. In January, the wind off the lake cut right through your jacket, and the rebar felt like ice when you tied it with bare fingers, because gloves made you clumsy. I remember one morning in particular. Snow coming down sideways, turning the site into a slurry. The developer was yelling that we were behind schedule, the inspector was late, and my youngest laborer, Ricky, asked me why I was so worked up about getting the forms dead level. Because, I told him, stomping the frost off my boots, if you cheat the ground it doesn't forget. You might get away with it for a season. Then the thaw comes, the soil shifts, and everything you built on top starts to crack. He laughed, said nobody ever sees the foundation anyway. That's the point, I said. Respect the part no one sees. Everything else depends on it. I didn't know it then, but I was giving myself advice for a life I hadn't lived yet. I married young, the first time. Linda and I grew up 3 streets apart. We scraped together a down payment on a starter house. She worked nights at the hospital while I chased contracts. She was there when I bought my first backhoe, when I signed the lease on a tiny office that smelled of dust and hopes too big for the drywall. We were together when the first big check came in, and when the first lawsuit arrived from a client who decided he wanted marble where he'd paid for laminate. We fought about money, about hours, about the way I always seemed to be on my phone. I thought that was just how marriage went. Then one day it wasn't a fight, it was papers on the kitchen table. I can't do this anymore, Marty, she said. You're married to that company. Not to me. I didn't see it coming. Or maybe I did, and I didn't want to. The divorce took half of what we had. Half the accounts, half the house, half the small pile of investments I'd thought would be for retirement. I remember standing in the empty living room after the movers left, staring at the ghost marks on the walls where our pictures had hung. What's fair is fair, my lawyer at the time said, patting my shoulder. I nodded, but something in me hardened. You can move money with the stroke of a judge's pen. You can slice it into percentages and label it equitable distribution. But you can't move dirt that way. The lots I'd quietly bought out by Lake Meriden, the gravel yard, the little patch behind the shop where I stored forms and scaffolding, those stayed with me. No court took them, because no one had thought to ask. Next time. If there is a next time, nobody's touching the dirt, I told myself, standing out behind the shop with the wind in my ears. The ground is for my blood. Everything else is negotiable. Decades blurred after that. Hale Foundations became Hale Foundations, and design when we stopped just pouring other men's dreams and started drawing our own. We specialized in lakeside builds. People with more money than common sense wanting glass boxes cantilevered over water. I'd walk their lots, feel the soil give under my boots, and tell them what they didn't want to hear about drainage and frost lines. Money came. Not all at once, but in steady, satisfying layers. I bought a parcel on the quiet side of Lake Meriden, a long, sloping piece of land with scrub trees and a rickety fishing dock. It took me 3 years of weekends and stolen afternoons to turn that hillside into a house. I framed walls after 12-hour days on commercial sites, drove nails by the light of work lamps, cooked hot dogs in the fireplace before there was a kitchen. By the time I was in my early 50s, the house was something people noticed. Local magazine did a spread. Contractor builds his own lake retreat. They called it rustic and elegant. I called it mine. The nights were loud with frogs and quiet with loneliness. That was when I met Sabrina. She came onto one of my sites like she owned the place, tape measure around her neck, tablet in hand. We were finishing a showcase home on the West Shore, the kind developers use as bait for other rich people. She was the interior decorator, brought in from the city to make sure the faucets and throw pillows photographed well. She was 30, with hair the color of polished mahogany and a laugh that bounced off the empty walls. She moved through the space in high-heeled boots like she'd never tripped over a cord in her life. "You must be Mr. Hale," she said, offering a hand with perfect nails. "I've heard so much about you. Good things, I hope?" I said, wiping concrete dust on my jeans before I shook. "All the good things," she smiled. "They say you're the guy who makes impossible sites stand up." We started with business. She walked me through her plans, rattling off design terms, showing me mood boards on her tablet. But between the fabrics and finishes, she asked questions. about where I'd grown up, about whether I ever took a day off, about whether I ate breakfast alone in that big house the magazine had drooled over. "I love older men," she said once, half teasing, half not. "Boys my age, they're all about potential. I'm tired of potential. I like stable. Solid." I should have heard the subtext: assets, established, less likely to bolt. What I heard was someone saying the thing I was afraid no one would ever say again: "I see you." I was 54 when I married Sabrina. She cried at the altar, mascara perfectly streaking down her cheeks like she'd practiced it. She said I made her feel safe. She posted a picture of our joined hands with the caption, "Marrying my rock today." For a while, I believed her. At first it was good. She brought color into that lake house I'd built with bare studs and bare emotions. She filled it with flowers and music. Through dinners where she bragged about my work to people who'd never held a hammer. She'd wrap her arms around me in the kitchen and tell me I was the reason she could breathe easy. "I don't care about money, Martin," she'd say, chin on my chest, eyes big. "I care about feeling safe. You make me feel safe." Social media was just starting to be a thing people our age had to care about. She started an account to document our life by the lake. At first it was harmless. Pictures of sunsets, of me grilling, of her feet on the dock. She called it the Hale House. Followers trickled in. She read me their comments like they were love letters. "We wanted a baby." Or "I did." Sabrina said she did, too, in the way you say you'd love to take a trip someday. It didn't happen easily. We tried for a couple of years the old-fashioned way. Then there were doctors' tests, terms I'd never heard before. When I was 51, Evan was born with the help of a doctor and more science than romance. I was there in the operating room, my heart hammering so hard, I thought the surgeon would tell me to sit down. They placed this tiny, squalling, angry thing in my arms, and for the first time in my life, I understood what it meant to be terrified of your own strength. He grew into a quiet boy. While other kids chased balls, Evan chased shadows of clouds on the water with his eyes. He'd rather sit on the dock and sketch than jump off it. When other fathers were yelling at their sons to run faster, I was trying to coax mine out of his room with the promise of a new set of pencils. "Why do you always start with the foundation?" he asked me once, maybe 8 years old, watching me fix a cracked step. "Because if you get the ground right," I told him, handing him a level, letting him check the bubble, "everything else can survive a storm." He frowned, taking that in the way he took everything in. Slow, deep, like he was measuring it against something inside himself. When he was 10, I turned the old detached garage into a studio for him. We cleared out the lawn equipment, insulated the walls, put in big north-facing windows. I built him a long table for his drawings and a narrow loft space where he could climb up and read. We spent evenings out there, him sketching floor plans for imaginary treehouses, me fixing odds and ends just to be near him. Sabrina loved him when the camera was on. She'd pose him on the dock in matching sweaters, caption it, "My whole world," and bask in the likes. Off camera, she was affectionate in bursts, then distracted, then impatient. "He's so serious," she'd complain, flipping through photos on her phone. "Can't you get him to smile more? People don't want to see gloomy kids in their feed. It kills engagement." "Is not gloomy," I'd say. "He's thinking." "About what?" she'd scoff. "He's 12. As her following grew, the house became less a home and more a set. Every season there was some new project we had to do for content. Paint the kitchen cabinets white. Tear them out and replace them with blue. Swap the light fixtures because black was in, then brass came back, then black again. "We need to keep it fresh," she'd say, spinning in the middle of the living room while contractors tramped over the hardwood I'd laid with my own hands. "My audience expects upgrades. It's part of the Hale House brand." Brand. It was such a small word for the way she was turning our life into a product. I let her. Mostly. There was a certain pride in seeing the place featured in magazines and on screens. In hearing strangers call it beautiful. I told myself it was harmless. That a little paint and some new tile didn't change the bones. Still, in the quiet moments, when she was off at a collab in the city and Evan was asleep in the loft above his studio, I'd sit in my old leather chair with a glass of whiskey and feel tired. Not the bone-deep, honest tired you get from a long day's work. Another kind. The kind you get from smiling too long. One night, years before divorce was anything more than a distant, unwelcome thought, I found myself in Alina's office for something as boring as a right-of-way dispute. We finished the paperwork, and she leaned back, studying me over steepled fingers. "How's married life?" she asked. "Good," I said automatically. Then, because I'd known her since she was a law clerk who used to bring coffee to my depositions, I added, "She's younger. Different world." Elena snorted. "You mean she lives on her phone and calls your house content," she said. "Martin, you're a grown man. You don't have to pretend with me." I smiled, but it felt thin. "She makes the place look good," I said. "Clients like it. Name recognition doesn't hurt. She also has no premarital assets, a decade on you, and a very public platform." Elena said, ticking points off on her fingers. "If this goes sideways, it won't be quiet." "Have you thought about that?" I looked at the wall behind her, where she kept framed plat maps and survey diagrams instead of art. Little boxes of land, lines and numbers. "After Linda," I said slowly, "I started structuring things differently. You know that." "You mean the way you split ownership between the land and the improvements on those commercial sites?" she said. "The shell and the soil." I nodded. "It's cleaner," I said. "Safer. The company owns the buildings. Separate entities hold the dirt. If somebody sues, they can't take what they don't know I have. Courts can move money, Alina. They can move walls. It's harder to move the ground itself if you've done your homework." She looked at me a long time. "You're talking about shopping centers," she said finally. "Not your own house." I didn't answer directly. I didn't need to. She knew me well enough to follow the trail. "You set something up," she said.
Didn't you?
"Just options," I said. "Paperwork. In case of earthquakes." She shook her head, but there was something almost like approval in her eyes. "You always were a man who respected foundations," she said. "Just make sure you're not building a bunker when you meant to build a home." I went back to the lake that night, to the house lit up from within, Sabrina's laughter spilling out onto the deck, where she was live streaming some cozy evening. To a few 100,000 strangers. Evan waved at me from the studio window, a sketchbook open on his knees. I stood under the eaves for a moment, listening to the murmur of a life that looked, from the outside, like a dream. Big house. Young wife, healthy son, business steady. Our name on blogs and in glossy spreads. I told myself I was just being prudent, tucking ownership of the land under one company, the structures under another, building walls between assets the way we framed walls between rooms. Protecting what I'd worked for. I thought I was just protecting a house. I didn't realize I was building a lifeboat for the only person who'd ever really needed me, my son. The first real crack in our foundation didn't appear in court. It appeared one perfectly ordinary Thursday over a cup of coffee and an unpaid bill. The morning it really started, nothing looked dangerous. The lake was flat as glass outside the kitchen windows, the sky that soft gray that makes everything feel like it's been washed in cool water. I was at the stove making eggs the way Ivan liked them, over medium toast a shade lighter than burnt. He was at the island, hunched over his notebook, earbuds in, pencil moving in those quick, precise strokes he'd inherited from no one I recognized. Sabrina sat at the other end of the island, tablet propped against a mug, scrolling with her thumb so fast it was a blur. Her coffee sat untouched, milk foam collapsing in on itself. "For God's sake," she muttered, stabbing at the screen. "They said they'd have the contract by yesterday. Do they think I don't have options? There are a dozen skincare lines that would kill for my numbers." She didn't look up when I set a plate in front of Evan. "Thanks, Dad," he said automatically, not lifting his eyes, the pencil still skating across the page. I caught a glimpse of the curve of our shoreline, the outline of the boathouse, the big panes of glass that made up the living room wall. He was drawing the house again, the way other kids drew superheroes. "Eat," I said. "You can fix the roofline after school." Sabrina snorted. "If he's going to be in the shot at all, he could at least sit up straight," she said. "You look like a question mark, Eve. It's bad posture and bad optics." He pulled one earbud out, blinking. "I'm not in a shot," he said. "I'm drawing." "That's the problem?" she said, finally dragging her eyes away from the tablet to look at me instead. I can't even film a simple morning in my kitchen, real without him in the background, slumped like Eeyore. It ruins the aesthetic. Could you maybe? I don't know, get him to stay out of frame when I'm working. I felt my jaw tighten. He lives here, I said. He's allowed to exist in his own kitchen. You know what I mean, she said, waving a hand. My audience comes for light, for inspiration. They don't want to see a sulky teenager inhaling eggs like he hates his life. Ivan's fork froze halfway to his mouth. He set it down carefully. Sorry, he said, too quiet. I'll eat in the studio. He picked up his plate and slid off the stool. The stool creaked. Sabrina winced. Can you at least not clomp like that? She snapped. It picks up on the audio. Honestly, sometimes I feel like I'm running a daycare, not a home. He flinched, the way you do when you touch something hot. I'll be quiet, he said, and disappeared down the hall. The mail slot clanked. The sound felt suddenly too loud in the thick air. I wiped my hands and went to the front door. A handful of envelopes lay scattered on the mat, glossy catalogs and plain white bills. Habit made me sort them by color, then by addressee. Electric water insurance. 1 with the furniture store logo. 3 with Sabrina's name, pale pink stationery that screamed, personal and expensive. I flipped one over. Past due. Another. Final notice. I carried the stack back to the kitchen and laid the pink ones beside her tablet. What's this? I asked. She glanced at the top envelope, rolled her eyes. Junk, she said. They get dramatic the second you're a day late. 2 of these say final, I said. And this one's from Eimer Furnishings. That's the place you ordered that ridiculous velvet chair from, isn't it? The moss green one for the reading nook, she corrected. It pulled the whole corner together. You said so yourself. I also said it cost more than my first truck, I reminded her. She snatched the envelopes up, crumpling them in one hand. I'm handling it, Martin, she said. You don't have to micromanage every bill. My name doesn't open doors the way yours does, remember. I have to juggle, sometimes. There it was. The first honest thing she'd said all morning. My name is on these accounts, I asked. She looked away, busying herself rinsing an already clean mug. Some of them, she said. It's not a big deal. You get better rates, that's all. I'll pay them. Can we not make a scene over mail? I'm not making a scene, I said. I'm asking why I'm finding out we're behind on luxury furniture by accident. Because you go nuclear over every dollar that isn't poured into concrete. She snapped. Because if I tell you I needed a new table for a shoot, you act like I've burned down the house. It's not about a table, I said. It's about you hiding things. She smiled then, a flash of teeth with no warmth. If I really wanted to hide things, believe me, you wouldn't find them in the mailbox, she said. Relax. Your empire's not in danger because I like nice chairs. Maybe it should have bothered me more than it did that she used words like empire and you're in the same breath, like she was already half removed from it. That afternoon, after she'd gone off to a strategy session with a brand rep, I walked down the hall toward my office. As I passed the doorway to the living room, I heard her voice, sharp and amplified. Can you not breathe so loud when I'm filming? She barked. I stopped. Ivan was on the couch, hunched over his sketchbook, pencil frozen. A tripod stood in front of the fireplace, phone clamped in place. Sabrina stood framed by the big windows, bathed in the kind of light you can't buy. I wasn't. He started. It's picking up on the mic, she said. Just go somewhere else, okay? I need quiet. Real quiet? Not your version. I stepped into the room, throat tight. He's not vacuuming, I said. He's breathing. That's still allowed in here, last I checked. She clicked the recording off with an exasperated sigh. You know what's not allowed, she said. Noise. Chaos. Bad vibes. I'm trying to build something here, Martin, and I can't do it with a human rain cloud sitting in my frame. Ivan slid off the couch without a word. Cheeks pink. He kept his head down as he went past me, like he hoped he might actually manage to vanish if he made himself small enough. He didn't look at me when I put a hand on his shoulder. He just kept walking, shoulders hitched up around his ears. That night, after he'd shut himself in the studio, I sat on the sofa while Sabrina scrolled through her phone. Notifications pinned softly. Hearts, comments, fire emojis. People love the pantry makeover, she said. See, look at this one, dream kitchen, dream life. I thought about the way Ivan had moved his cereal into the studio fridge last week. Maybe we should talk to someone, I said.
She did look up. About what?
Shelf liners? About us, I said. About how we are handling things. About Evan. She laughed, short and sharp. You want family therapy, she said. Now? When everything is finally taking off? Everything? I asked. Or you? She set the phone down slowly, deliberately. I am the one in front of the camera, she said. I am the one answering emails at midnight and smiling when I don't feel like it and negotiating brand deals while you're out measuring dirt. Don't you dare act like this is some selfish hobby. I'm not, I said. I'm saying there's 3 of us in this house, and only 2 of us seem to be happy. Maybe that's worth 5 hours with a neutral party. She stared at me for a beat, then smirked. You really think I'd risk half of this for a fling or a bad mood? She said. You think I'm that stupid? The word fling landed like a stone dropped in still water. It spread out in circles, touching other memories that hadn't meant much on their own. Her phone faced down when I walked into rooms. Laughter that didn't stop when I did. A gym friend named Troy who texted late at night about workouts that didn't seem to involve much exercise. I didn't say that, I said carefully. You didn't have to, she said. You're the king of subtext. She picked up her phone again, conversation over. 2 weeks later, the school called. The vice principal, a woman with a perpetually pinched expression, sat across from me and folded her hands. Mr. Hale, Evan is a bright kid, she said. His teachers say he's capable of more than he shows. But this latest incident worries us. Latest incident. You'd think he'd set the gym on fire. He skipped a mandatory pep rally, she said, and he blew off his portion of a group project. The other students are upset. He skipped a rally. I repeated. That's it. It's not just about attendance, she said. It's about engagement, community. We want our students to feel invested in school spirit. I bit back the urge to ask her when exactly algebra started requiring pom-poms. When we got home, Evan trudged up the front steps like he was walking into a courtroom. I'm sorry, he said before I could speak. I didn't want to yell in a crowd for a team I don't even like. And the group project I froze. I couldn't present. They were all looking at me. We'll talk about it, I said. We'll figure it out. It's not the end of the world. Sabrina was in the kitchen, arranging a fruit platter into something Instagram-worthy. How was school? She called, not turning around. Good. Even lied. I opened my mouth to say otherwise. To tell her we needed to sit down together, as a family, and talk about expectations and anxiety and the difference between disobedience and a panic attack. The vice principal's words were still ringing in my ears when Sabrina's phone chimed. She snatched it up, glanced, and smiled in a way that didn't reach me at all. Brand wants me in LA next month, she said. Week-long content retreat. This could be big. We're talking national exposure. Can we talk about Evan first? I said. She sighed, slammed the knife down a little too hard. What did he do now? She asked. He skipped a rally, I said. He froze on a project. The vice principal is worried he's checking out. I think we need to. He skipped a rally, she repeated slowly, as if translating. So what you're saying is, while I am killing myself to make this house and this life look perfect, he can't even be bothered to pretend he's a normal kid for one afternoon. He doesn't like crowds, I said. You know that. You don't like them either, unless you're on a stage. He is 17, she snapped. 17, Martin. When I was his age, I was working 2 jobs and still managing to show up. He sulks. He eats. He hides in that studio. He's dead weight. The words hit me first. Then I realized Evan had heard them too. He was on the stairs halfway up, frozen. His hand clutched the banister so hard his knuckles were white. His face was blank, but his eyes looked like someone had just told him the roof over his head was made of paper. Sabrina, I said, warning in my tone. She either didn't see him or didn't care. I am pulling this whole brand uphill by myself. She went on, voice rising. Constantly smiling, constantly planning, constantly worrying about algorithms and lighting and partnerships. And what do I get? A husband who thinks therapy is the answer to everything, and a son who can't even show up to clap at a pep rally. If we didn't have to drag a sullen teenager around, I could do brand tours in Europe. Do you know what that would be worth? Mum, Even said quietly. She turned, finally seeing him. For a heartbeat, I hoped she'd soften. That she'd say she didn't mean it, that stress was talking. She didn't. Don't look at me like that, she said. You heard me. You want me to lie. To pretend this energy doesn't drag me down. He swallowed. Maybe if I wasn't here, he whispered, you'd be happier. The silence that followed was worse than any shouting. He turned and walked up the rest of the stairs, each step slow and deliberate. I heard his bedroom door close with a soft click. The sound of someone who has learned not to slam things because it only gives people more to yell about. I stood there, staring at the place where he'd been, feeling something shift under my feet. Not like an earthquake. More like realizing the creak in the floorboard you've been ignoring for years is actually wrought. That was out of line, I said. Oh, spare me your dad of the year routine, she snapped. He'll survive hearing the truth. I didn't trust myself to speak. My hands were shaking, not from age this time, but from the kind of anger that makes you cold. I walked down the hall to my office, closed the door, and went to the safe behind the framed blueprint. The metal was cool under my palm. The old combination turned easily. Inside, among the boring things, insurance policies, a worn photograph of my parents, a watch that didn't tick anymore, was a thin folder with a yellow post-it stuck to the front. Meriden Land Trust. Draft. I carried it to the desk and opened it. Survey maps, deeds. Articles of organization I'd half forgotten I'd asked a junior associate to draw up years earlier. Names of holding companies that sounded like empty shells, but represented something solid. I picked up the phone and dialed Elena's direct line. It rang twice. Ruiz, she answered, brisk. It's Martin, I said. My voice sounded strange to my own ears. Hypothetically, if my spouse walked away, is there a way to shield the land for Evan's future? Not the house. The ground, so no matter what happens up top, he has somewhere to stand. On the other end, paper rustled. I could picture her frowning, the way she always did when she was sorting through the facts and the feelings at the same time. Hypothetically, she said slowly, yes. If we finalize the structure we talked about. If we separate the land properly. Put it into trust now, before anything blows up. I looked at the closed door, at the way the late afternoon light cut a strip across the floor. Through it, I could see the faint outline of Evan's footsteps worn into the wood over years of climbing those stairs. Then let's stop talking, I said, and get it done. That night, after the house went quiet and Sabrina fell asleep scrolling through other people's lives, I sat at my desk and signed papers that would split my world in two. The house everyone could see, and the ground nobody thought to ask about. But planning on paper is one thing. Watching someone rip your child's heart out in front of you is another. That came later, on the morning my life finally shattered. 2 years after the first time she called our son dead weight, the house barely felt like mine anymore. By then, Sabrina had rebranded everything. The Instagram handle, the YouTube channel, the little logo on the bottom of her videos. All of it now read, Life at the Hale Residence, as if the place were a living thing and she was its beating heart. I was background when I appeared at all. A pair of hands passing her a bowl, a laugh off camera, the quiet rock she referenced when it was useful to look like she valued marriage. People love you, she'd say, patting my cheek. You're so grounding, rounding, like a wire you connect so the main current doesn't fry anything important. Her phone lived on the counter now, propped in a little ring light, always filming something. Coffee pours. Sunlight on the sink. Her bare feet walking across the hardwood I'd installed, the caption, grateful for another day in this sanctuary. Off camera, there were more late nights, dieting, in the office, more strategy meetings, in the city, more arguments silenced not by resolution but by her hitting record and turning on a smile. I told myself it was a phase. That once the novelty wore off, she'd come back to earth. Denial is a powerful thing. The proof arrived in my email. I was on my laptop in the office, sorting through invoices, when a little notification box popped up in the corner of the screen. New photo added to shared cloud. That happened sometimes when Sabrina shot pictures on her phone. It would back up to the shared account we'd set up years ago when we only had one computer in the house. I clicked it without thinking. The image filled the screen. A hotel room, all soft gray and white. Sabrina in the foreground, hair mussed, wearing a robe that wasn't from our bathroom, holding up her phone to catch her reflection in a gilded mirror. Behind her, on the bed, a man in his 20s, shirtless, tan, ab muscles carved like they'd been sculpted. He was grinning, hand reaching toward her waist. The caption, half-cropped, read, "Jim Buddy knows how to." I closed the window so fast my fingers fumbled on the trackpad. For a moment I just sat there, staring at my own reflection in the dark screen. 66 years old. Lines carved into my forehead from years squinting into the sun. Shoulders a little more stooped than they used to be. The veins in my hands standing out like the rivers on an old map. I could have pretended I'd misread it. Could have told myself it was an old picture, a joke, something taken out of context. But the date stamp at the top of the screen was from the night she'd told me she was staying at the Four Seasons with a brand to shoot content. Content. That's what everything was, in the end. I printed the hotel receipt I found in our joint account history, the one with room service charges for two and a spa bill, that didn't match any partnership I knew about. I printed the photo before I could lose my nerve. The paper slid out of the machine warm and incriminating. She was in the kitchen when I walked in, standing at the island, filming herself stirring oatmeal and calling it, "Nourishing start for my Hale House boys." I waited until she finished the take. She hit stop, checked the angle, smiled. "Not bad," she said. "I just need a close-up of the toppings." "Sabrina," I said. She glanced up, annoyed at the interruption. "What?" she asked. "Can it wait 10 minutes? I need the light." "No," I said. "It can't." Something in my voice must have reached her, because she shut off the ring light. "What's your problem?" she asked. I laid the papers on the counter between the bowls. She looked down. For the first time in a long time I saw her genuinely startled. Her mouth opened, then closed. "That's invasive," she said finally. "That's our shared cloud," I said. "Don't lecture me on privacy when you've turned our bathroom into a set." She picked up the photo between two fingers, as if it might stain. "This is not what it looks like," she began. "It looks like you in a hotel room with a man half your age," I said. "It looks like betrayal." She stared at the picture, then at me. Her face hardened. "I've been unhappy for years," she said. "You know that. Unhappy. Like a drafty window or an off-color paint. You're old, Martin," she went on, words gathering speed. "You're tired. You go to bed at 10 and talk about drainage. I am still young. I still have a life to build. This house," she gestured around us, "deserves better energy than you sulking in the corner and Evan moping upstairs. This house," I said slowly, "was wood and glass. It doesn't deserve anything. People do. Your family does." She laughed, a harsh sound that bounced off the tile. "Family," she said. "You mean you and the boy who barely speaks. The one who ruins every shot with that hangdog expression. I am the one who built something here. I took your little contractor lake house and turned it into a brand millions of people recognize. I filled it with beauty. I made it worth something." I repeated. "To who?" "To everyone," she snapped. "To sponsors. To followers. To me." I picked up the hotel receipt, tapped the total. "Did they pay for this?" I asked. "Or did I?" She snatched it and crumpled it. "I'm not doing this," she said. "I'm not going to stand here and be shamed like some teenager. If you'd paid attention to me once in a while instead of caressing blueprints, maybe I wouldn't have needed other outlets." I took a breath that felt like it scraped my lungs. "What do you want then?" I asked. "Spell it out." She met my eyes, and in that moment all the filters and soft lighting in the world couldn't soften what I saw there. "I want out," she said. "Of this? Of you? I want the house. I want the cabin. I want the cars. I want what I have earned by building this life online. I am the face of the Hale residence. Without me, it's just another old man's lake house." "And Ivan," I said. She blinked, as if the thought had genuinely not occurred to her. "What about him?" she asked. "What happens to our son in this future where you have everything?" I asked. "Where does he go?" She shrugged. as if we were discussing a misplaced rug. You can keep him, she said. The words were so casual it took a second for them to land. You can keep him, I repeated. She rolled her eyes. Don't be dramatic, she said. I can't exactly be lugging a sulking 17-year-old to brand retreats and content houses. He'll be fine with you. You have the money, the patience. Whatever. I need my freedom. A soft thud came from the mudroom behind us, the sound of something small hitting wood. We both turned. Evan stood in the doorway, backpack dangling from one hand. The other pressed to the console table he'd just backed into. His face was pale, freckles standing out like someone had scattered them there in a rush. His eyes were too wide, like a deer in headlights. He must have come in the side door while we were arguing. Must have heard enough. Evan, I said. He looked at me, then at her. You can keep me, he asked, voice thin. She straightened, smooth as if a camera had switched on. You weren't supposed to hear that, she said. Not like that. How then? He asked. In a post. Hey guys, just an update. I'm keeping the house and leaving my kid with my ex-husband because he clashes with the decor. His sarcasm cut sharper than I'd ever heard it. It made me both proud and sick. Don't be ridiculous, she said. You're almost grown. Your father has the resources. He can hire tutors, therapists, whatever you need. I'm not a good fit for moody teenagers. I've done my time. I carried you, you know. I gave you life. Now I choose me. You're talking about him like he's an extra chair in the sunroom, I said. Something you can just decide doesn't match your color scheme anymore. Her jaw clenched. I'm talking about survival, she said. About not drowning under your combined weight. I have one chance to build something for myself before I'm the one being traded in for a younger model, and I am taking it. Ivan's backpack slipped from his fingers. It hit the floor with a muffled thump. So it's me or the house, he asked. She opened her mouth, closed it, then lifted her chin. It's me or my sanity, she said, and I pick my sanity. He made a sound then, a kind of choked laugh that wasn't a laugh at all. Got it, he said, loud and clear. He turned and ran past us, through the kitchen, out the side door to the detached studio. The door slammed. A second later the lock clicked, a tiny, decisive sound. I went after him. Ivan, I called, pounding my fist against the studio door. Son. Go away, came the muffled reply. His voice was raw. Please. I pressed my forehead to the wood. Whatever she says, I said. You are not a burden. Do you hear me? You are not dead weight. You are the only thing in this house that isn't replaceable. For a long moment, there was only the sound of my own breathing and the soft hum of his space heater on the other side. Maybe not to you, he said quietly, but she just chose a house over me. That's all I needed to know. The floor lurched under me, though I knew it was just my knees giving a little. Ivan, I began. No, he said. No more speeches. Just leave me alone, Dad. Please. I stood there until my legs ached, until the cold seeped through my shirt, until the sun slid lower and the trees threw long shadows across the yard. Finally, I walked back to the main house. Sabrina was in the living room, rearranging throw pillows. Don't start, she said without looking up. We said things. It's over. We can't unsay them. You said things. I corrected. He heard them. There's a difference. She grabbed her phone, thumb moving fast. I need to get ahead of this, she said. Control the narrative. Control the... I stopped. What are you talking about? She looked at me like I was slow. We are a public couple, Martin, she said. People notice when husbands disappear from the frame. If I don't explain it, they'll make things up. I'm going live in an hour. We'll do a parting ways with love video. We'll say we've grown apart. That you're focusing on your work, I'm focusing on mine. We keep it classy. Classy, I repeated. And I'll make it clear that I'm always going to be a mother to Evan, she said. No matter what, people eat that up. Strong single mom, putting her kid first, even when it hurts. It'll play well. You just told him he was too heavy to carry, I said. Now you're going to tell the world you're carrying him alone. She shrugged. Optics, she said. You don't have to like it. You can't rewrite reality because it doesn't fit your feed, I said. You can't both toss him aside and claim him for sympathy points. Watch me. she said. That night, I stood in the doorway of the den and watched her compose her little performance. Ring light on. Camera propped. Tears coaxed to the surface with whatever sad music she'd picked for the background. "We've decided to part ways," she said to her followers, voice trembling artfully. "Martin is such a good man. But sometimes good people just want different things. He needs more time for his projects, and I need to honor my path. But I want you all to know I am and always will be a mom first. Evan is my heart. We're going to navigate this with love." Down the hall, in the studio, I could hear the faint, muffled sound of my son crying. Real, ragged sobs that had nothing to do with lighting or audience retention. It felt like watching someone drive a bulldozer into a half-built house while the concrete was still curing. Everything inside me screamed that if we just shouted loud enough, waved our arms big enough, we could stop it. But the operator was focused on another job entirely. Her next appearance, her next applause. When she finished filming, she replayed the clip, nodding at her own performance. "That'll do," she said. "They'll eat it up." I went to my office, shut the door, and pulled out a different kind of script. Not the kind you rehearse in front of a camera, but the kind that gets time-stamped and slid into a file at the county clerk's office. I knew I couldn't fight her in the comments section. I needed someone who understood the language of land, not likes. That's when I called Elena back. Elena's office always felt like the opposite of my house, where Sabrina filled every surface with candles and throws and things that looked good in the background. Elena kept her space stripped down to what mattered. Dark wood desk, 2 leather chairs that had seen better days, shelves lined not with awards but with binders and framed land surveys. Plats and deeds hung on the walls where other lawyers might have put diplomas. Lines, measurements, contours. The bones of other people's stories. She was pacing when I walked in, a sheaf of papers in her hand. "You have got to be kidding me," she said, not bothering with hello. She waved the stack at me. "Please tell me you have not agreed to this yet." She slapped the papers down on the conference table between us. I recognized the letterhead from Sabrina's fancy downtown firm. I recognized my name, too, at the top of every page. "Haven't signed anything?" I said. "That's why I'm here." "Good," she said. "Because this is extortion with better fonts." She jabbed a finger at the first page. "She wants the Lake Meriden residence. She wants the North Shore cabin. She wants both cars. She wants all contents, art, furniture, fixtures. She wants a 7-figure lump sum. And this," she flipped to the last page with a snap, "this little cherry on top. She wants to walk away from any obligation to Evan. No support, no visitation schedule, clean slate. She basically wants to sell your son for the house." She looked up, eyes blazing behind her glasses. "Tell me you are not considering this," she said. "Tell me you haven't gone so numb that you're ready to hand her everything and say thank you." I pulled out the chair opposite her and sat. My knees cracked in protest. I felt older in that moment than I had the day I turned 60. "I'm considering it," I said. "Under one condition." She stared at me like I just announced I was taking up skydiving. "One condition," she repeated. "Which is?" "That clause about Evan," I said, tapping the back page. "It doesn't go away. It gets sharper. Irrevocable termination of parental rights. No claim now or ever on any trust, inheritance, or asset connected to him. We anchor it in concrete and rebar." Elena sank into her chair, the cushions sighing. "You're serious?" she said. "I am," I said. She took off her glasses and rubbed her eyes with the heel of her hand. "You're thinking like a father who just watched his kid get gutted," she said. "Not like a businessman. That's dangerous, Martin. You give her this package, she waltzes out with everything visible of value, and you're left in a rented shoebox with a teenager who thinks you failed him." I reached into my leather folder and pulled out a slimmer, older one. The edges were softened from years of being moved from safe to drawer to bag. The label on the front, in my own handwriting, read Meriden Ground Holdings, LLC. "I'm not giving her everything," I said. "I'm giving her what she can point a camera at." She slid the folder closer, wary, and opened it. The first page was the Articles of Organization for Meriden Ground Holdings. The next, a deed from 10 years ago transferring a legal description she knew all too well. She read the parcel number under her breath. "This is the lot for the lake house," she said. And this is the cabin. Just the land, I said. Not the structures. She flipped to the next document. Deeds from Hale Residential, Inc. To me personally for improvements located upon parcels X and Y. Then a lease agreement between Hale Residential and Meriden Ground Holdings. She whistled low. You built a commercial ground structure split under your own house, she said. After my first divorce. Yes, I said. I promised myself the dirt would belong to my blood, not my mistakes. She kept reading. Her lips moved slightly as she traced the clauses with her finger. It was all there. In black and white, Meriden Ground Holdings owned the raw land. Hale Residential owned the physical buildings. Hale Residential leased the land from Meriden Ground Holdings at a token rent, renewable in perpetuity, unless the structure ownership transferred to any party with no legal relationship to the trust beneficiary. She stopped. The trust beneficiary, she said slowly. This is owned by an education and welfare trust for Evan. She flipped to the trust agreement. The name at the top, the Evan Hale Education and Welfare Trust. Grantor. Beneficiary Evan James Hale. Trustee an independent fiduciary firm. You put the land in an irrevocable trust, she said. Years ago. When he was 6, I said. Right after I turned that garage into his studio. I knew 2 things: he was always going to need somewhere quiet to think, and I was always going to be 5 steps from the grave compared to most dads. I wanted him to have something no one could rip out from under him. But you kept the house in your personal entity, she said. Why? So we could live in it, I said simply. So I could borrow against it if I needed to, fix it up, sell it in a pinch. Flexibility. The land, though. She nodded slowly. The land is locked, she finished. She turned back to the lease agreement. Her eyes narrowed at a paragraph halfway down. Upon transfer of the improvements to any party who is not the grantor or a lineal descendant of the beneficiary, she read, this lease may, at the lessor's sole discretion, be revoked. Upon revocation, continued occupancy of the land by said improvements shall incur an occupancy fee equal to fair market rent plus a beneficiary compensation charge, payable monthly to the trust. She looked up. This isn't a ground lease that just auto-terminates, she said. This is a trap with a velvet lining. Call it what you like, I said. If she takes the house and the cabin, Hale Residential no longer owns the improvements. The lease doesn't apply. Meriden Ground can revoke. And anyone whose name ends up on those structured deeds, but doesn't share blood with my son, suddenly owes his trust a whole lot of money every month for the privilege of sitting on his dirt. Elena stared at me, then let out a breath that sounded half like a laugh and half like a curse. If she takes the house, she said, she becomes a tenant of her own son. No, I corrected gently. She becomes a tenant of his future. She leaned back, tapping the documents against the table. Do you know what this looks like from the outside? She asked. It looks like you got fleeced. Like she took you to the cleaners and left you with the kid as a consolation prize. I'm aware, I said. Every friend I have will shake their head and say I should have fought. They'll think I went soft. They won't see the other file in the drawer. And if she has half a competent lawyer, they'll pull the title, see Meriden Ground Holdings on the land and Hale Residential on the structures, and start asking questions. Elena said, You're betting on arrogance. I've been watching her for 14 years, I said. She doesn't ask questions. She assumes. The Elena flipped to the trust's purpose clause. The occupancy fees revert to the trust, she said. They don't go to you. They shouldn't, I said. It's not my money. It's Evan's education. His cushion. If I'm gone, he's got a roof he can't be bullied out of, an income that isn't dependent on his mother's mood. She chewed on the end of her pen, a habit I'd been watching since she was a junior associate with 2 big suits and bigger ideas. There's another wrinkle, she said. If she signs this parental termination clause, she's not just giving up custody. She's severing her legal relationship to Evan. No rights, no responsibilities, no standing. That's the point, I said. Martin, listen, she said. If, down the road, she has some epiphany, tries to come back, tries to leverage I'm his mother to get better terms on the occupancy or buy into the trust, she won't be able to. She'll have no more claim to that trust than a stranger off the street. I know, I said. This is brutal, she said quietly. She'll be walking into a financial buzzsaw. She thinks she's getting a mansion. She's getting a liability with a pretty view. I offered her a marriage, I said. A family. 4 walls and something solid under them. She wanted a brand launch. I'm not tricking her into anything. I'm giving her exactly what she's choosing, and making sure my son has something left when she's done burning everything else. She was silent for a long moment. Outside the window, the city moved in miniature. Tiny cars. Tiny people, going about their own dramas. You know, there's a part of me that loves this, she said finally. The part that spent law school learning all the ways rich people hide assets and thinking, why don't the decent ones ever use these tools? I'm not hiding, I said. Meriden Ground and Hale Residential are public record. The trust is filed. Anyone who looks below the first layer can see it. And that's what you're counting on, she said. That they won't look. She stacked the documents neatly. Here's what we do, she said. We respond to their proposal and accept item for item. House, cabin, cars, contents, lump sum. We don't haggle. We don't counter. We just have one non-negotiable condition. That parental termination and inheritance waiver stays verbatim. We highlight it as giving her the freedom she wants. And we don't mention land, I said. Not in any way that draws the eye, she said. Why bury the references where they've always been? Standard definitions. Underlying land interests is held by third parties. The kind of thing junior associates skim and say, boilerplate. She tapped a line in the trust. Once she signs and the deeds record, Hale Residential is out, and her name is on the improvements, she said. Meriden Ground can revoke the lease and issue an occupancy schedule. She either pays market rate rent plus compensation, or she sells, or she walks and lets the trust take the buildings in lieu of payment. And by then, I said, won't matter what story she tells about who left who. She'll have no legal tie to Evan and no leverage over his future. Elena put her glasses back on and looked at me over the rims. This is the line, Martin, she said. Once we cross it, there's no coming back. You can't decide 3 years from now that you want to make it easier on her, or that you feel bad watching her squirm. The land will not care about your conscience. The land, I said, is for my son. Not my conscience. Not her comfort. She studied me a long time, then nodded once. All right, she said. Let's build this trap right. For the next hour, we went through the draft line by line. We stripped out any fluffy intent language Sabrina's lawyers had added. We tightened the waiver. We made sure Meriden Ground and the trust were referenced only in the vaguest, most boring terms. We left the pretty parts, the list of assets she'd be handed, in nice, shiny bullet points. When we were done, Alina sat back and tapped the settlement packet. She's going to think she's cleaving you in half, she said. In reality, she's taking the shell off the frame. If she had ever once asked, whose name is actually on the land? None of this would have worked, I said. If she'd ever cared about what held the house up instead of what color the walls were, I'd be the one sleeping on a friend's couch. She never did, Elena said. I picked up the pen she slid toward me and signed the cover letter authorizing her to send the revised version. The papers are ready, she said, gathering them up. All that's left is to get her so drunk on victory she'll sign away the only bargaining chip she has left your son. I stood, my knees protesting, and headed for the door. Then let's give her a feast, I said, and see how she likes the bill when it comes due. Kellen's office looked like a magazine spread about success. Glass walls, chrome fixtures, an espresso machine that hissed in the corner, throwing off the smell of roasted beans and money. The conference room we were shown into had a wall of windows overlooking the river, the water flashing between skyscrapers like a reminder that something in this city still moved on its own schedule. Sabrina walked in ahead of me like she owned the place. New dress, new shoes, new confidence. She'd gone a shade blonder since the last time I'd really looked. Connor trailed in her wake, all teeth and tan, but Kellen waved him toward the lobby. Clients only in here, I'm afraid, he said with a sympathetic smile. Firm policy. Connor shrugged, pulled out his phone, and retreated. Sabrina barely glanced back. On my side of the table, Elena laid out her files and clicked her pen 3 times, a tell I'd learned decades ago. She was angry. Good, we needed her clear, not sentimental. Kellen settled in across from us, lacing his fingers over his silk tie like a pastor about to deliver bad news wrapped as a blessing. Thank you all for coming, he said. I know this has been challenging. But I think we're going to leave here today with closure. He drew a packet from his folder, thick and crisp. Pair our discussions, he said. This is the final settlement agreement. He read it as if he were reciting a menu. Transfer of all of Mr. Hale's right title and interest in the Lake Meriden residence. He began, including all improvements, fixtures, furnishings, and associated amenities to Ms. Hale. Transfer of the North Shore cabin and associated land use rights. Transfer of both Mercedes-Benz vehicles. Transfer of all intellectual property, branding, and goodwill associated with the Hale residence, life at the Hale residence, and related online ventures. I kept my eyes on Sabrina. Her pupils dilated at each item like a kid watching gifts slide under the tree. In addition, Kellen went on, Mr. Hale will provide a lump sum equalization payment in the amount of $600,000 within 60 days of judgment entry and will assume responsibility for Ms. Hale's reasonable legal fees to date. He looked up, eyes glittering. Given your income potential, Martin, and Sabrina's need to maintain continuity for her brand, this is, frankly, more than fair. Elena's jaw flexed. You left out my favorite part, she said. The part where your client walks away from any obligation to the child she brought into this world. Kellen's smile didn't slip. I was getting there, he said. He flipped to the back page and slid a single sheet toward the center of the table. As agreed, he said, Ms. Hale consents to Mr. Hale retaining sole physical and legal custody of Evan. She waives any right to seek support from Mr. Hale in relation to Evan. And, he tapped the paragraph halfway down, she relinquishes any current or future claim to financial arrangements made for or on behalf of Evan, including trusts, inheritances, and other assets held in his name now or later. He looked at Sabrina, not me. This is what you wanted, he said gently. Freedom from obligations that don't serve you. The ability to move where you need to, when you need to, without being tethered to school schedules or custody arrangements. She nodded, eyes on the text, lips moving just enough to make it look like she was reading. Elena turned to me, her voice so low it was almost a vibration. You still have an out, she said. We can counter. We can insist on shared responsibility, on some form of contact. You don't have to let her do this. I shook my head, never taking my gaze off Sabrina. You always said you wanted to be free, I said to her. No custody hearings. No child support squabbles. Just you and the house you love. This makes you completely free. She met my eyes for a fleeting second. There was no remorse there, no conflict. Just calculation. You're sure you're okay with this? She asked. With having him full-time. He's not a houseplant, I said.
He's my son.
She smiled, as if I'd said something sweet. Then this is better for everyone, she said. He stays with the parent who enjoys, that kind of thing, and I don't have to pretend I'm cut out for PTA meetings. She picked up the pen Kellen offered her. Elena's hand tightened on my sleeve one last time. I could feel the question in her fingers. Are you sure? I was. Just so we're clear, I said as Sabrina poised the pen over the signature line. This means no say in his schooling. No say in his medical decisions. No claim on any trust in his name. No claim on his estate if, God forbid, something happens to him. Martin, Kellen interjected smoothly, we don't need to. Sabrina waved him off. I know how to read, she said. I'm not an idiot. He'll thank me someday for not dragging him through this. Kids don't need 2 miserable parents fighting over them. They need one who actually wants them. I thought of Evan in the studio, pressing his palms over his ears to block out her words, and felt something inside me go cold and hard. She signed. The scratch of her pen on paper sounded, to me, like a door clicking shut. Kellen turned to me. If you'll sign where indicated, Martin, he said. I signed my name under each transfer, each obligation, each slice of flesh she'd taken. House, cabin, cars, lump sum, fees. When I was done, Kellen's assistant gathered the documents and left to run them down to the clerk. As soon as they're recorded, he said, standing, you'll both be free to move on. Sabrina rose too, smoothing her dress. I have a brunch reservation, she said. We're celebrating. She slipped her phone into her bag, then paused as if remembering something. Oh, she said to Kellen. Make sure the statement we release emphasizes that we're committed to co-parenting. My audience needs to hear that. I don't want trolls accusing me of abandoning my son. Elena made a sound that might have been a laugh if it hadn't had so much venom in it. You just did, she said. On paper. Sabrina's smile didn't waver. On paper no one reads the fine print, she said. They read captions. She floated out of the room on her own applause. Later that week, I put on my best suit and drove to the Lakeshore Club. The valet hesitated when I pulled up in the old Ford instead of the Mercedes, but took the keys anyway. Inside, the lobby smelled of oak and old money. Men I'd done deals with for decades nodded at me with that mixture of pity and curiosity people reserve for those who've just been through a public beating. I was meeting George, an engineer I'd known since we were both too green to be trusted with anything higher than a two-story. He'd called me after hearing rumors about the settlement. His voice had been awkward on the phone. Thought we could have lunch, he'd said. Talk. Though we sat at a corner table overlooking the fairway. The linen napkins were as stiff as ever. Heard you gave her everything, George said finally, slicing his steak. House, cabin, cars. That true? Just about, I said. He shook his head. Never thought I'd see the day, he said. You used to be a bulldog. What happened to fighting? I picked my battlefield, I said. Not everyone understands that. He grunted, unconvinced. The waiter brought the check on a little silver tray. Habit made me reach for it. I've got this, I said, pulling my wallet out. The black card I'd carried for years slid into my hand like it always had. I handed it over without thinking. 2 minutes later, the waiter was back, face tight. I'm sorry, Mr. Hale, he said, voice pitched low. Your card, it was declined. Do you have another method of payment? I stared at him for a second, the words not fitting in my ears. Declined, I repeated. He nodded, eyes flicking toward the other tables, worried about a scene. Of course it was. Our main accounts had been linked to that card. The minute those transfers recorded, Sabrina's lawyers had likely advised her to close and consolidate. In the shuffle, this one had slipped through a crack, then been slammed shut. I patted my pockets. A few bills. Not enough for 2 club lunches. I must have grabbed the wrong wallet, I said, before the humiliation could fully crest. A familiar laugh cut across the room. Oh, for heaven's sake. Sabrina's voice sang out. Put it on my tab. She stood at the next table over, Connor at her side in a jacket that didn't quite fit his shoulders. Her cheeks were flushed, eyes bright. She was riding high. The poor man's in transition, she said to the waiter loud enough to carry. These things happen. A few heads turned. A pitying smile floated my way from a table of younger executives. George stared hard at his water glass. That's kind of you, I said. Think of it as a donation, she said. To the newly divorced. Connor snickered, then coughed when she shot him a look. I stood collecting what was left of my pride with my coat. Enjoy your lunch, I said. Oh, we will, she said. Connor's never had the lobster here. It's life-changing. As I walked past, she leaned in just enough so only I heard. See, she murmured. No hard feelings. I didn't answer. Outside, the winter air hit my face like a slap. The valet jogged to fetch my truck, trying not to look like he wondered why a man in a tailored suit was climbing into a vehicle with rust on the wheel wells. When I shut the door, the cab felt very small and very quiet. To anyone watching, it would have looked like the final act, the powerful contractor reduced to fumbling for a check he couldn't cover while his ex-wife played benefactor. A morality tale about hubris and age and foolish love. They saw an old man who couldn't pay for his soup. What they didn't see was the email notification that had pinged on my phone 10 minutes before I walked into the club. Confirmation from the county recorder's office. The deeds for the house and the cabin were officially in Sabrina's name. Hale Residential was out, which meant Meriden Ground Holdings was now free to exercise the rights buried in that dusty lease. I pulled my phone from my pocket and dialed Elena. It's done, I asked when she picked up. Recorded as of this morning, she said. House and cabin both. Sabrina Clark, sorry Hale, is now the proud owner of a very expensive shell. And Meriden? I asked. We filed the occupancy schedules an hour ago, she said. Certified mail courier, the whole 9 yards. As of the recording date, any continued use of that land by non-beneficiaries incurs fees payable to the trust. Tick, tick, tick. I watched Sabrina through the club window as she tossed her head back at something Connor said. A perfect hostess in a perfect life she thought she'd stolen clean. Let them think I can't cover a meal, I said. Did the trust acknowledge receipt? And then some, Alina said. Our trustee's already drafting the first invoice. I hung up and sat there for a moment, listening to the engine idle. Humiliation still burned in my chest, but underneath it was something colder, more deliberate. They saw an old fool with a declined card. What they didn't see was the meter I'd just switched on under Sabrina's new kingdom. The next step wasn't about courts or cameras. It was about math, and a knock on a very expensive front door. 2 weeks after the settlement recorded, the lake house looked better than it ever had. I knew that because I'd seen it on my phone, not because I'd set foot near it. 3 triumphant new chapter. Videos in 14 days. Sabrina had been busy. One showed her twirling in the empty living room. Captioned, I fought hard to keep this sanctuary. Another, a slow pan of the kitchen I'd tiled myself, now staged within an inch of its life, declared, always trust your gut, ladies. Never settle for less than you deserve. The third was just the view from her bedroom deck set to inspirational music. By contrast, our new sanctuary was a 2-bedroom rental on the edge of town that smelled faintly of old cooking oil and someone else's regrets. The ceilings were low, the carpet was the color of dirt because it hid it, and the only view from the living room window was the back wall of a strip mall and a dumpster that overflowed every Monday. The landlord had painted everything the same off-white, and somehow the walls still looked dirty. I stood on a chair in the kitchenette, screwing a new bulb into a fixture that flickered on and off whenever the fridge kicked in. Try it now, I called. Avon flipped the switch. The light hummed, then steadied. Congratulations, he said flatly. We have consistent lumens in our palace. His room was barely big enough for the narrow bed and a thrift store desk. His posters, which had once spread across a whole wall in the studio, now curled at the edges where we'd tried to tape them up. His sketch pads were stacked in a milk crate in the corner. He'd stopped drawing the lake house. You know, he said, watching me climb down. We didn't have to do this. Do what? I asked. Roll over, he said. Hand her everything. Move into a shoebox because you didn't want to fight. I tightened the last screw. Old hands knew anger. You think this is about me not wanting to fight? I asked. He shrugged, looking away. What else am I supposed to think? He said. She's in Moore House drinking champagne with her followers, and we're here eating spaghetti out of one pot because you need time to reorganize. You're the guy who scares developers. And you just gave up. I opened my mouth to explain. To tell him about Meriden ground, about the trust, about how the ground under that house had never been hers to own. Then I pictured his face if he slipped. If he texted something to a friend, or if Sabrina wheedled a detail out of him on some desperate late-night call. If she got even a day's head start on the notices. Some wars you win in silence, I said instead. We won't be here forever. He laughed without humor. Yeah, he said. Sure. That night at Lake Meriden, the house glowed like a lantern. I know because I drove past once, slow, on the far side of the road, headlights off. It was foolish, maybe, but I needed to see it with my own eyes one last time, not through her filters. Lanterns lined the driveway. Cars filled the turnaround. Music thumped faintly, the bass line traveling down the hill. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, I saw silhouettes moving, glasses raised. A drone buzzed up from the back deck, lights blinking red and green, capturing aerial footage of Sabrina's welcome to my sanctuary party. Inside, she would be doing what she did best, narrating. Over here is the kitchen I fought so hard to keep, she'd be saying, hand brushing the marble. There's a whole story there I can't share yet, but just know, ladies, you can always advocate for what you deserve. Not a word about the boy she'd left behind in a rental. At 9 p.m. On the dot, according to the timestamp on the process server's affidavit later, a gray sedan rolled to a stop at the end of the driveway. The man who stepped out looked so ordinary he might have melted into any crowd. Late 40s. Average build, tan trench coat, a leather portfolio tucked under his arm. He walked up to the gate, pressed the call box. A moment later, Sabrina's voice crackled through the speaker. "Delivery," she trilled. "We weren't expecting anyone else, but if it's the wine, just bring it up to the house." "Mems Hale?" the man asked. "Yes," she said. "I have documents for you," he said. "From Meriden Ground Holdings, on behalf of the Evan Hale Education and Welfare Trust." There was a pause. "Never heard of them," she said. "Leave it at the door. I'm required to hand them to you directly," he said. "And obtain your acknowledgement of receipt." More silence. Then the gate clicked and swung open. Guests watched with curiosity as he approached the front steps. Sabrina met him under the porch light, dress glittering, a flute of champagne dangling from her fingers. "This is the strangest collab I've ever had," she joked, loud enough for her nearest friends to hear. "Do you sing or something?" He didn't smile. "Ms. Hale," he said, holding out the envelope and a clipboard. "This is not a court summons. It's a billing statement. I just need your signature here to confirm service." "Billing," she repeated, frowning. "Occupancy fee assessment and notice of land use relocation," he said, tapping the printed title through the envelope. Her friends tittered. Someone filmed on their phone. Old habits die hard. "Fine," she said, scribbling her name without reading. "There. Now can I get back to my guests?" "Thank you for your time," he said, and walked away. She tore open the envelope as soon as he was gone, still half laughing. "Can you believe the nerve?" she said. "Martin must be really bored." She pulled out the first page, eyes scanning lazily. The words were printed in neat, unemotional type. "Dear Miss Hale," she read aloud, putting on a mock formal tone. "As current owner of the improvements located at 14th of Meriden Point, you are hereby notified that continued occupancy of the underlying land, parcel number, blah blah blah, is subject to an occupancy fee payable to the Evan Hale Education and Welfare Trust." She stopped. Guests shifted, sensing a change in the air. "Effective as of the date of transfer of said improvements, and in accordance with the lease revocation provisions of 2013, monthly land usage fee is assessed at $22,000, payable on the first of each month." She read, voice flattening. "Additionally, a retroactive beneficiary compensation charge in the amount of." Her eyes darted to the number halfway down the page. The color drained from her face beneath the makeup. $187,000. She finished weakly. "Due within 30 days from the date of this notice." Someone laughed, uneasy. "Good one, Martin." A man in a blazer said. "Did you hire a prank company?" Sabrina's hand shook. She flipped to the next page. Attached were copies of the recorded deeds, one showing her name now tied to the house, another showing Meriden Ground Holdings as owner of the dirt beneath her feet. Then the trust documents, the lease language, the revocation clause. She read one line twice. "Structure ownership does not convey ownership of the underlying real property." She murmured. "Unauthorized continued occupancy shall incur fees payable directly to the beneficiary trust." She turned the first page back over, eyes hunting for a mistake. "Land usage fee payable to the Evan Hale Education and Welfare Trust." She read. "Remit to account number." What the hell is that? The music had faded to the background. Conversations had thinned. People were watching. "Is this real?" one of her friends asked. She stabbed at her phone, hit Kellen's number, put him on speaker. She said, too loud, "What is this?" "Good evening, Hale." His smooth voice floated out. "I'm in a dinner meeting. Is everything?" "I just got a thing," she cut in. "From Meriden Ground something on behalf of an Evan Trust. It says I owe $22,000 a month to stand on my own property, plus back charges. Tell me this is a joke." Silence as he processed the words. Paper rustled on his end. "Meriden Ground Holdings," he repeated slowly. "Trust. Occupancy fees." "You're my lawyer," she snapped. "You said the settlement was airtight. You said I owned this house." "You do own the improvements," he said. "The structure." "I own the house," she said. "The land it sits on. All of it. We signed. We signed transfer of the improvements," he said, talking faster now. "The deed to the house. I did not perform a separate title search on the underlying land parcel. It was presumed contiguous. Presumed, she echoed. Her guests glanced at one another. Someone edged toward the bar. Are you telling me, she said, each word clipped, that my ex-husband just sent me a bill to exist in my own home and you didn't see it coming because you presumed? I need to review the documents, Kellen said. Email them to me. Tonight. Do not ignore them. This could have tax implications. We may need to negotiate with the trust administrator. Negotiate, she screeched. With my son. The last word came out like a slur. Ems Hale, he said. I strongly advise you not to. She hung up without saying goodbye. For a moment she just stood there, chest heaving, papers trembling in her hand. Then she laughed again, too high, too sharp. This is garbage, she announced, waving the notice over her head. He can't do this. I own this house. This is harassment. She tore the packet in half, then in quarters, confetti of legal jargon fluttering to the polished floor. See, she said, forcing a smile. Problem solved. Top off your drinks, everyone. Who needs lawyers? Her friends chuckled dutifully. The music crept back up. Someone stepped on a piece of paper, grinding it into the rug with a stiletto. What she couldn't tear up was the copy at the county, or the certified mail already unwrote, or the digital file living on the server of the trust company that had no interest in being Instagrammable. Across town, in our cramped living room, my phone buzzed on the coffee table. A text from Alina. Served. No issues. Clock is running. I set it down face down. I could hear the shower running in the tiny bathroom, Evan trying to wash off another day of bitterness with cheap shampoo. He emerged in sweatpants and a t-shirt, hair damp. Headphones around his neck. He glanced at the phone. Another bill, he asked. Just Alina, I said. Figuring out how much more we have to cut back so she can buy another couch, he asked. There are no more couches to buy, I said. We're as cut back as it gets. He dropped onto the sagging couch beside me. Do you ever regret it? He asked suddenly. Not fighting. Not making her share. We could have stayed. We could have forced her to leave. I looked at him. At the shadows under his eyes, the way he'd stopped asking when his mother was coming by. You let her throw us out, he said, voice tight, so she could live there and we rot here. How is that protecting me, Dad? The words hit harder than any insult Sabrina had ever thrown my way. I didn't let her throw us out, I said quietly. I chose to leave on my feet instead of being dragged. That sounds like something you say to make yourself feel better, he said. Not like something that helps me when I'm lying in a bed 3 feet from the fridge listening to the neighbor's TV through the wall. He wasn't wrong about the fridge or the TV. The walls were thin. Every argument, every laugh from next door seeped into our lives whether we wanted them or not. There are things moving you can't see yet, I said. On paper. In places she never bothered to look. I don't care about paper, he said. I care that she chose a house over me and somehow she got the house. And you got the land, I almost said. Instead, I took a breath. I know it doesn't look like it now, I said. But I didn't surrender out of weakness. He stared at me, searching my face for something I wasn't allowed to show him yet. Then what did you do it for? He asked. For you? I said simply. Every signature, every box packed, every insult I swallowed, for you? He shook his head. Feels like you did it for her, he said. He got up and went to his room, closing the door with more care than the anger in his shoulders suggested. The light under the bottom glowed for a while, then went dark. I sat there in the dim, listening to the hum of the old fridge and the distant wail of a siren somewhere on the highway. My phone buzzed again, a confirmation email from the trust administrator. Notice acknowledged. Account active. On paper, I'd wrapped Evan in a wall no one could breach. In real life, he couldn't feel it yet. All he could see was the cracked paint and the way his mother's life looked like a victory parade. I'd protected my son on paper. Now I had to prove to him I hadn't just surrendered out of weakness. Sabrina's first instinct had been denial. Her second, I would soon learn, was more familiar territory for her performance and attack. She wasn't going to quietly negotiate with a trust she'd never bothered to understand. She was going to sue me. That was the best gift she could have given me. The courthouse looked different when you walked in as a defendant. Before, during the divorce, I'd come through those doors feeling like a man marching himself to the gallows. This time, as I stepped into the second-floor courtroom behind Elena, there was a strange steadiness in my legs. Same scuffed tile, same humming fluorescent lights, same stale coffee smell drifting out of some unseen break room. Different weight in my chest. Sabrina had filed her suit fast. Harassment, abuse, bad faith interference with her lawfully acquired property. In her complaint, she painted me as an obsessed ex-husband using arcane corporate structures to punish her for moving on. She asked the court to invalidate the occupancy fees, bar Meriden Ground from enforcing the lease, and enjoin me personally from any further attempts to undermine her security. Security. It sounded better than free house. She was already there when we walked in, seated at the plaintiff's table in an expensive black dress that managed to look both modest and dramatic. Her hair was pulled back in a low chignon. Makeup smoked just enough to read grieving instead of glam. In the first row of the gallery, 3 of her friends sat with their phones in their laps, screens dark but ready. A local reporter I recognized from the lifestyle section perched at the end of the bench, notebook open. Kellen stood beside her, shuffling papers with the air of a man certain of his argument. He shot me a look that was equal parts pity and derision, the way you look at a contractor who insists the plans are wrong. On our side, Alina laid out our file with a precision that would have made a surgeon jealous. Deeds, trust agreements, lease documents. She had tabs in 3 colors and a pen that clicked only once. In the second row behind us, Evan sat between 2 empty seats, shoulders squared, jaw set. He'd insisted on coming. When I'd asked if he was sure, he'd said, "If everyone else is going to say my name in there, I'd like to hear it." The bailiff called the room to order. Judge Patterson took the bench, her robe swallowing her frame, her glasses low on her nose. She glanced at the docket, then at us. "Case of Hale versus Hale," she said. "Ems Clark." "Excuse me, Miss Hale. Petitioning the court for injunctive relief. Mr. Hale present with counsel." "Counsel? State your appearances." We did. Formalities rolled by like distant thunder. Kellen stepped forward first. "Your Honor," he began, his voice smooth enough to butter bread, "we are here because a woman is being terrorized in her own home." Sabrina dabbed at the corner of one eye with a tissue, perfectly timed. "Emma's Hale," he went on, "negotiated a divorce settlement in good faith. She accepted sole responsibility for a property that has become her livelihood and sanctuary. In reliance on that settlement, she moved in, invested further in improvements, and publicly anchored her brand there. 2 weeks later, out of what can only be described as spite, her ex-husband weaponized a labyrinth of shell companies to present her with an outrageous so-called occupancy fee and retroactive charges totaling hundreds of thousands of dollars. He shook his head, letting the numbers hang in the air. "This is not a commercial lease dispute," he said. "This is harassment. This is an attempt to claw back assets he willingly gave her by using their minor son as a legal bludgeon. We are asking this court to declare those fees unenforceable and to restrain Mr. Hale and any entities he controls from further interference with Ms. Hale's quiet enjoyment of her property." He sat, satisfied. Judge Patterson turned to Alina. "Ms. Ruiz," she said. Alina stood unhurried. "Your Honor," she said, "despite Mr. Price's theater, this is in fact a commercial lease dispute, one that began 10 years before Ms. Hale ever stepped foot in that house." She picked up the first document from our stack. "This is a recorded deed from 11 years ago," she said, approaching the bench. "Transferring parcel 4M7, commonly known as the land under the Lake Meriden residence, from Martin Hale to an entity called Meriden Ground Holdings LLC Bow." She handed it up. The judge scanned it, then nodded. "This is the operating agreement for Meriden Ground Holdings," Elena continued, "which specifies that the sole member is the Evan Hale Education and Welfare Trust, an irrevocable trust established when Evan was 6 years old. Mr. Hale is the grantor of that trust, but he is not the beneficiary, nor can he revoke it. The beneficiary is Evan Hale. The trustee is an independent fiduciary firm." Another document up, another nod. "This," Elena said, "is the deed for the improvements, the house and the cabin, showing that they were owned by a separate entity, Hale Residential Inc., until the divorce settlement transferred those improvements to Miss Hale personally. And finally," she said, lifting a thicker packet, This is the lease agreement executed in 2013 between Hale Residential and Meriden Ground. It granted Hale Residential the right to use the land in exchange for nominal rent renewable, with a specific revocation clause. She flipped to the key paragraph and read aloud. Upon transfer of the improvements to any party who is not the grantor or a lineal descendant of the beneficiary, she quoted, Meriden Ground Holdings may, at its sole discretion, revoke the lease. Upon revocation, continued occupancy of the land by said improvements shall incur an occupancy fee equal to fair market rent plus a beneficiary compensation charge, payable monthly to the Evan Hale Education and Welfare Trust. She let the words sink in. Your Honor, she said, this structure has been in place for over a decade. It predates Ms. Hale's involvement with Mr. Hale by years. At the time of the divorce, Mr. Hale did not own the land personally. Only the improvements were part of the marital estate. He transferred those improvements to Ms. Hale. In doing so, he exercised his rights under the settlement. The trust, through Meriden Ground, is now exercising its own rights under a lease that Ms. Hale's lawyers either failed to investigate or chose to ignore. Judge Patterson leaned back. Mr. Price, she said, did you or your firm perform a title search on the land parcel at issue when you advised your client to accept the properties in the settlement? Color crept up Kellen's neck. We conducted a standard search on the residence, he said. The focus was on the structure. It was understood that the land was part of the conveyance. Understood by whom? The judge asked. Because I'm looking at a deed that says otherwise. He opened his mouth, closed it. We may not have fully appreciated the bifurcated ownership model in this case, he admitted reluctantly. She said, not unkindly. That much is clear. She turned her attention to me. Mr. Hale, she said, did you disclose the existence of Meriden Ground Holdings and the Evan Hale Trust during your divorce proceedings? Yes, Your Honor, I said. They were listed in my financial disclosures as non-marital assets. The deeds are public record. And did this court transfer any interest in the land to Miss Hale? She asked. No, Your Honor, I said. Only the structures. She nodded. So, she said, we have land owned by a trust for the benefit of your son. We have a house owned by Ms. Hale sitting on that land, and we have a lease that was revocable upon transfer to someone outside the family line. That's the situation. Yes, Your Honor, Elena and I said together. The judge shifted her gaze to Sabrina. Ms. Hale, she said, did you review the divorce settlement before you signed it? Yes, Sabrina said, chin high. My attorney did. And you understood that you were relinquishing all parental rights and future claims related to your son, Evan? The judge asked. Sabrina flicked a glance toward the gallery, where Evan sat very still. I wanted a clean break, she said. For everyone. You understood, the judge repeated, that you were no longer Evan's legal parent. No rights, no responsibilities. Sabrina's mouth tightened. I understood the words, she said. I didn't think it meant his father could turn him into a weapon. Judge Patterson sighed. Ms. Hale, she said, legally you are occupying land that belongs, in beneficial interest, to your son. The trust holds title, but the beneficiary is the very child you chose to leave behind. The fees you received notice of are not Mr. Hale sending you a nastygram. They are the trust enforcing its rights under a lease your own counsel failed to uncover. That's ridiculous. Sabrina snapped. You can't just say my son owns the ground under my house because Martin moved some papers around. The trust was created when Evan was 6, Alina said calmly. Long before your brand. Long before your channel, long before you decided you were tired of family life. The land has never been yours to own. Sabrina's composure cracked. She whirled on Kellen. You told me it was mine, she hissed. You sat in that office and said you won. I asked you if there were any hooks, any tricks. You said no. One negotiated a very favorable settlement, he said weakly. At the time. Based on the information. Information you were too lazy to look for, she shot back. You got your fee, your little victory speech. And now I'm the one getting bills addressed to a trust I didn't even know existed. She turned her fury on me. You set me up, she said. You old bastard. You set me up from the beginning. I met her eyes, and for once, didn't feel the usual sting. I protected my son? I said. You were free to ask the same questions you've told your followers to ask for years. Who benefits? What's the fine print? You didn't? You tricked me, she insisted. Ms. Hale. Judge Patterson cut in sharply, gaveling once. Nuff. No one held a gun to your head when you signed away your parental rights in exchange for property. You made a choice. You wanted the house, you wanted the name. You wanted the brand. You took them. And now you've discovered that the foundation under your trophy belongs to someone else. Sabrina sank back into her chair, eyes glassy. So what? She said hoarsely. I just what? Pay him rent. Pay my own son to let me live in the house I fought for. The trust, not Mr. Hale, the judge corrected. But yes, you can pay the occupancy fees. You can attempt to renegotiate the lease with the trustee. Or you can vacate. Those are your options. This court is not in the business of rewriting 10-year-old contracts because someone failed to read them. Kellen tried one last tack. Your Honor, he said, spreading his hands. Surely equity must play some role here. Ms. Hale's entire livelihood is now tied to this property. Her business. Elon Musk could be renting the place for all I care. Judge Patterson said dryly. The law doesn't change because someone points a camera at a wall. A ripple of chuckles went through the gallery, quickly stifled. She banged her gavel lightly. The petition for injunctive relief is denied, she said. The occupancy fees and charges stand as a valid exercise of rights by the landowner and trust. Ms. Hale, the court suggests you direct your energies toward negotiating with the trustee rather than filing baseless harassment suits. Mr. Hale, Ms. Ruiz, you are within your rights here. Court is adjourned. The sound of the gavel echoed in the wood-paneled room. Sabrina seemed to deflate. Her friends in the gallery suddenly found the floor fascinating. The reporter's pen scribbled faster. As people shuffled to leave, Alina gathered our files. Then she paused, watching Sabrina stare blankly at the torn edges of her dignity. Wet for me in the hall, she murmured to me. She crossed the aisle, heels clicking. Sabrina looked up, eyes red but still burning. Come to gloat, she spat. Elena's voice dropped, soft enough that only those closest heard, but clear. You didn't just sell your son for the house, she said. You sold him the ground under your feet. As Sabrina flinched, as if the words were a physical blow. What are you talking about? She whispered. The land belongs to Evan now, Alina said. In trust, legally, financially. Every check you write from here on out, every negotiation, every sleepless night over these fees. You will be answering to the future of the boy you called dead weight. For a second, all the bravado, all the curated persona slipped. I saw pure, naked horror in her eyes. Not just at the money, but at the idea that she was beholden to the child she'd cast off. That her big win made her a debtor to the very person she'd seen as an anchor dragging her down. She looked over Alina's shoulder. He stared at Evan. He stared back, expression unreadable, hands stuffed in his pockets. He looked older than 17 right then. Not because of wrinkles or lines, but because he'd just watched the adults in his life have their illusions stripped away in public. She took a step toward him, hesitated when the bailiff cleared his throat. Eve, she started. He shook his head once. You made your choice, he said. His voice didn't crack. You don't get to pivot now because the contract didn't say what you thought. She opened her mouth, closed it, clutched her designer bag like a life raft. I followed him out into the hallway. The fluorescent lights out here buzzed louder. The paint on the walls scuffed where countless shoulders had brushed past. He waited by the window at the end, looking down at the street 3 stories below. Cars moved like toy models. People rushed by with their own problems. You okay? I asked. He let out a breath that was almost a laugh. I don't know, he said. I just heard my name attached to more legal documents than I knew existed. I'm sorry you had to be part of that, I said. He shook his head. No, he said. I'm glad I was. Otherwise I'd still be thinking you just folded. That you let her win because you were tired. He turned to face me. You did all of this, he said slowly, for me. I didn't play humble. There are times for deflection and times for truth. Yes, I said. Not to punish her. That's extra. I did it so you'd always have something solid under you. So no one could ever use you as a bargaining chip again. So if I drop dead tomorrow, there's a piece of the world that is yours in a way no one can spin or steal. He nodded, swallowing. It's messed up, he said. All of it. The fact that she could just sign me away. The fact that you had to turn land into armor. But, he looked back toward the courtroom door. For the first time since we left the house, he said, I don't feel like the only person who lost. We walked toward the stairs together, our footsteps echoing in the stairwell. Sabrina had walked into that courtroom, thinking she'd finally get to play the victim. Prove to a judge and to her followers that I was a bitter, broke old man tormenting her, because I couldn't stand to see her happy in the house she'd earned. But she walked out realizing she was squatting on our son's future, and the rent was due. Winning on paper is one thing. Going home to a 17-year-old who has watched both his parents at their worst and still has to decide what kind of man he wants to be. That's another entirely. 6 months after that day in court, the lake looked the same. Water doesn't care who thinks they own the view. The sun still hit it at the same angle in the late afternoon, turning it into strips of silver. Boats still cut across it in lazy arcs on Saturdays. Ducks still left their messy little trails along the shallows. Everything else had changed. Sabrina tried to keep up at first. I'll give her that. The first occupancy bill, she ignored. The second, she ran it about online without saying my name, posting vague captions about predatory exes and corrupt systems. Her followers, bless them, flooded her comments with hearts and outrage. Fast Stand with Sabrina trended in our little corner of the internet for almost a day. But hashtags don't pay $22,000 a month. They don't erase a 6-figure back charge. They don't impress a trust company whose only job is to count. When the first late fee hit, she filmed a tearful video about choosing joy in the face of legal bullying. When the second hit, she started selling off furniture and decluttering for a cause. Posts. The designer sofa went first. Then the antique table she'd made such a fuss over importing. Then pieces from the cabin, listed quietly through a consignment dealer in town. The cars went next. One morning, a tow truck rolled up in front of the house and took the white Mercedes while she stood on the porch, arms crossed, insisting into her phone that it was voluntary downsizing. A month later, the black SUV followed. Connor didn't appear in her videos much after that. Her content changed. Less about abundance. More about letting go. More shots cropped tight so you couldn't see what was missing off-screen. A few keen-eyed viewers caught glimpses of the notices from Meriden Ground and the trust on her counter in the background of one vlog. Comments started asking why she suddenly hated land law. She deleted those. Eventually, the bills outran the spin. Disclosures scared off buyers when she tried to list the house at market value. No one with sense wanted to inherit a fee schedule and a hostile landlord who didn't care about their aesthetic. The price dropped, then dropped again. In the end, the only serious offer came from exactly who we'd expected. The trust. On a rainy Tuesday, sitting in Alina's office with a mug of coffee gone cold, I watched her flip through the final purchase agreement. Meriden Ground Holdings, on behalf of the Evan Hale Education and Welfare Trust, to acquire the improvements at 14 Meriden Point 4. She whistled softly at the number. Less than the cost of your first commercial garage. I signed as grantor, not as buyer. The trustee signed on behalf of Evan's future. With that, land and house were reunited on one set of papers that didn't have Sabrina's name anywhere. Are you going to move back in? Elena asked. I looked at the address at the top of the document, at the familiar numbers.
No?
I said. Not yet. Maybe not ever. She raised an eyebrow. Sentimental, she asked. Practical, I said. If we live there now, it will always be her story we're sleeping in. Better to hold it. Rent it to someone who sees a house, not a stage. Let it be ready for him when he's old enough to decide what he wants to do with it. After college. After he's built something that's his, not just mine with a different name. Back in our apartment. Now a slightly bigger one 2 floors up in the same building, with less mold and a balcony just big enough for 2 chairs. Evan and I ate spaghetti again, this time with sausage. Progress comes in small steps. He sat across from me at the wobbly dining table, a manila folder spread between our plates. Trust statements, lease summaries, a letter from the trustee welcoming him, now that he was approaching 18, into the conversation. So, he said, flipping through the pages. Let me get this straight. He pointed at a chart. The land and the house are both in this trust now. he said. For me. But not for me to just blow on stupid stuff. Correct, I said. The rental income from the cabin, and if we choose, the main house, goes into this. It pays for your education first. Then a cushion. Anything after that, we've earmarked to go to a fund for other kids who get dropped. He nodded. And I can't touch the principal without approvals, he said. You built me a piggy bank with a lock I can't pick. I've seen what sudden money does to people, I said. It turns them reckless or fearful. I don't want either for you. He chewed thoughtfully. You could have kept the house and fought her, he said. Dragged it out. Maybe gotten a better deal. Maybe hurt her more. I could have, I said. I could have spent years in court, traded motions like punches, and watched you dragged through evaluations and custody interviews and co-parenting sessions, where everyone pretended something was salvageable that wasn't. Instead, I made sure you'd never be used as a bargaining chip again. He looked up, met my eyes. I'm sorry I called you a coward, he said quietly. Back when we moved in here, I didn't see any of this. I just saw what we lost. I don't blame you, I said. I should have trusted you with more of the truth sooner. I thought protecting you meant carrying the whole thing alone. I forgot you're strong enough to hear the ugly parts. He smiled, brief and real. Ugly is kind of my specialty lately, he said. We finished eating in the easy silence of people who have fought and forgiven and are still learning how to live with both. Later, after he went to his room to work on a design portfolio instead of another sketch of a house he didn't live in, I sat out on our little balcony with a blanket over my knees and my phone in my hand. A photo floated up in my feed. Someone had tagged me in it, not realizing our history. It was Sabrina standing in front of a brick building in another city, cheaper than Meriden but dressed up with fairy lights. The caption was something about starting over in a cozy nest, all about resilience and reinvention. If you zoomed in, you could see the paint peeling on the windowsills. No lake in sight. She looked smaller. Not physically, just less. There was a tightness around her eyes I hadn't seen before, a brittleness in the way she held her shoulders. For a moment, I felt a flicker of pity. This, too, was a kind of exile. A woman who'd built her whole identity on a backdrop, and a last name now relegated to a walk-up with bad plumbing and neighbors who didn't care about her brand deals. Then I remembered the way Evan had looked at the staircase that day, backpack slipping from his hand as she said she'd keep the house and I could keep him. I remembered his voice saying, maybe if I wasn't here, you'd be happier. She wrote her own script. I just refused to keep paying for props. Sabrina thought she won because she walked out with the house keys and my last name on her license. But a house without solid ground is just a pretty box waiting to fall. Greed will always chase what glitters and ignore what's underneath. In the end, the most valuable thing she walked away from wasn't a deed. It was her own child. People think wealth is the cars in the driveway, the zeros on the bank statement, the stock options. I used to think that too. But sitting there in a modest apartment, hearing my son laugh at a video through the thin wall, knowing there was a piece of earth in this world that was his and safe and untouchable, that felt richer than any balance sheet I'd ever signed. Splitting the land from the structure, setting up companies and trusts, that was just paperwork. The real trap was always her own choice. She valued marble over motherhood. She put content over connection. All I did was make sure that when the bill for those choices came due, it didn't land on my son's shoulders. She took the walls and the windows, son. I'd told Evan the night the trust closed on the house. We kept the ground, and we kept each other. If you were in my position, would you ever be willing to let your spouse take everything on paper in order to protect your child's future, even if the world thought you were weak for it? Has anyone ever tried to control your home, your money, or your decisions because they thought your age made you easy to manipulate? How did you respond, and do you wish you'd done anything differently? If this story made you think twice about what ownership really means, tap that like button so more people hear it. Subscribe and turn on notifications if you want to hear more true to life stories of elders who refuse to be treated like fools. Tell us in the comments where you're listening from, and whether you believe blood alone makes someone family, or if it's how they stand by you when the ground starts to shake.